Hello and welcome. I am Katrina Pratt Roebuck, and I am the founder and CEO of Uplifme. And Uplifme is a national resource hub that provides information on social service events happening across the country that address the social determinants of health. We also highlight the great work of organizations that serve their communities every day. So, today I have with me Kevin Dow, who is the executive director of the Regional Foundation. So welcome, Kevin, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, Kevin, can you start by telling us about the work of the Regional Foundation?
Yeah. Um, the Regional Foundation is a philanthropic organization. We have a mission to improve quality of life of children and families living low income or low wealth, we like to say, communities throughout Eastern Pennsylvania, the state of New Jersey, and the state of Delaware. We concentrate on resources and comprehensive neighborhood-based economic and community development initiatives that are driven by residents, owned and driven by residents. We award neighborhood planning grants, neighborhood implementation grants that support long-term, resident-driven neighborhood revitalization.
Okay, great. So, can you talk a little bit more about that? What type of activities do you fund that is driven by residents?
Yeah, we want to drive work that residents. We fund organizations, nonprofit organizations that work with residents in their communities. They draw a specific area of work where we concentrate. Has to be low wealth, low income area that is in need of investment. And we want to drive vibrant, equitable, economically viable neighborhoods. We do everything from streetscape improvements, facade improvements. We do work around supporting affordable housing, both ownership and rental. We support activities that involve conversion of empty lots into parks. We do street lighting. We do work, support the efforts of work around workforce training. There's an anchor institution in the neighborhood, a partnership from the neighborhood. There's a portal pathway for residents to join the workforce in the anchor institution. We support that. So it's a number of things that is driven around what residents say they need most. We work through them with a planning process and go through implementation, but they drive what the areas they want to concentrate. So some do a little bit of everything. Some focus on one particular area where they have the greatest expertise and the capacity to do that.
Okay, great. So, in just listening to some of those activities, it sounds like there's some themes. Are the themes around what residents are seeking to address around like corridor revitalization, or is it like health and safety? What would you say are some of the themes of what you're funding?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it could be a little bit of both. It could be that. So quarter revitalization, economic development, small business development. We help support lending to small businesses. We
Okay.
work with CDFIs, community development financial institutions that are located in communities that are lending to small businesses, typically along commercial corridors. In Philadelphia, you might think of Lancaster Avenue. Um, you might think of supporting businesses through the African American Chamber, um, all different types of organizations or initiatives, I should say, that are based in these neighborhoods. So the themes are access to capital, clean and green space,
Mm-hmm.
uh, workforce development, training, affordability, affordable housing,
Hmm.
quality of life, which could be, removing the grid, putting in parks, putting in trees, engaging people in their communities around building murals, any number of different things. Again, all driven by a group of residents that say, "Hey, in my neighborhood, these are the things I want to achieve to improve it, to make it better, to make it a place of choice." To attract people to live, play, and work if possible in their communities. And we help facilitate that thought process, developing plans as well as then implementation. We don't do that work. We fund it as a
Okay.
philanthropic organization to support that.
Okay. So, can you talk a little bit about how organizations apply for the funds? And for me, in listening to you, I'm not sure I'm clear on if it's the neighborhood organization that drives the work, if there's a resident that comes to a neighborhood organization and asks to do this work. How are those needs sort of funneled to the community-based organization that then seeks funding
That's a
from regional
you know,
foundation?
yeah, that's a good catch, Katrina. I'm glad you said that because sometimes I talk about it in the same vein, and it needs to be clear. We fund organizations,
Okay.
and typically it doesn't have to be, but typically, oftentimes, they're community development corporations,
Okay.
CDC. Okay. And those CDCs are place based, so they operate in
Mhm.
a particular place. And in their work, everyday work, they are engaged in community work and in residents. And so they are engaged in residents. So if there's a resident aspect, they're going through this partner of ours, the CDC, who then
Mhm.
comes to us and say, "Hey, I'm working in, I'm working in certain sections of Germantown. And I want to revitalize this area of Germantown. I'm engaging the residents, working with all of the neighborhood associations, the resident associations, and we've come up with some ideas. We want to kind of coalesce that into a plan. They come to us. We help facilitate that with some financial resources, and then they go out and create a plan. Not only that they can implement, but they also, an important thing, that they could take somewhere else and say, "Hey,
Mm.
for another funder to fund, say, hey, I have a plan, very quality plan, well put together, that they can then present to others for potential funding resources, either at the government level, state, federal, local, or other private foundations."
Okay, that's great. Thank you for explaining that in more detail. And it's really helpful to hear how these ideas are sourced and that these organizations are already embedded in communities and working with them every day. So they really have their hand on the pulse of what's happening and able to get that resident input into the application process. Can you talk a little bit about the size of grant that is provided to organizations? Just trying to sort of get a feel for the scope of the work that can be done with your grants.
Sure, sure. We have I call it our bread and butter, right? And so we have planning grants,
Okay.
which are 1 year grants, and they can actually 1 year in that in the sense they could be 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
Okay, and those are typically 125,000, 150,000.
Okay.
Um, and upon successful completion of the planning grant,
Mhm.
on successful completion of that, and then um, the successful awarding of an implementation grant, those can be anywhere between um, 500,000 to just north of $1 million. Over 5 years. So if you divide that 500,000 over 5 years, it's $100,000 a year for
Okay.
implementation. Um,
Okay.
we typically say to our partners, once you get into an implementation, we know that planning and implementation and neighborhood revitalization is a long path. It's a journey, and so we typically would expect, uh, a renewal at the end of the first 5 years. So if you're successful, everything goes well, we're liking it, we still have resources, we then are able to do 2 5-year grants. So that's a
Wow.
10-year period where we're doing implementation. If you add in the planning aspect, that's an 11, 12-year period that we're partnering with the organization directly through those two grant programs.
That is really wonderful. I
Yeah,
think that, a lot of times folks are often concerned about falling off the funding cliff, not having enough resources. So the size of your grant is substantial and the length of term is enough for folks to really be able to make some changes. So thank you for sharing that. I think that that is really significant when we think about folks trying to change communities, right? Trying to change the trajectory of a certain issue that they want to address. So I think that the work that you're doing is really significant in being able to accomplish that well. Can you talk a little bit about perhaps something the public may not know about the Regional Foundation that you'd like to share?
Yeah, yeah, we are. It's interesting. We are a public charity, um,
A public charity.
and,
Okay.
mhm. And what I mean by that is, as a foundation, we have resources. We have an endowment. We also have responsibility to build that endowment with
Mm.
additional resources. And so, and the way we're able to do that is to offer a tax deduction 501(c)(3), like most nonprofits. Um, and as a public charity status, community foundation status. Most people don't know that. We don't necessarily advertise it. We probably should. The reason why I'm saying it here, be quite candid, and where people can support us in number of ways in that regard.
So we will certainly want to advertise that for the Regional Foundation. We will put that in the notes to this video so that people can come on and your website and support through donation. But
Yeah.
before I let you go, I wanted to ask you another question about just sort of the trajectory of the Regional
Mhm.
Foundation. Can you talk a little bit about what you're expecting to accomplish over the next 12 months, let's say?
Yeah, yeah. I've been thinking a little bit about that as we've begun to do some strategic planning. We as an organization, without getting into the minutiae details, we went through a significant transition about 2 or 3 years ago,
Okay.
and has enabled us to have the opportunity to become that public charity and to be able to give.
Mhm.
But it also has enabled us to step back and look at all the work that we do. So um, we've been able to um, scale up our staff. So we did this transition. We had zero staff, so they hired me as the executive director. I was able to bring on top-notch programmatic team. We're now to a total um, uh, employee count of 5 people. We probably will stay that size. So that's a big thing that they're going to accomplish in 23 as we now then got to, or getting back to operational excellence where we're doing all of our stuff really good. We were executing our relationships with our grantee partners, our stakeholders, all of our board. And now what we're looking to do is we've begun to have conversations about strategic planning. What does that look like? Not to change what we do. We've always wanted to be community development, neighborhood revitalization. But ask ourselves, are the tools that we have the right tools? Is it planning? Is it implementation? Can we think of others? We've created some recently, capacity building grants, capacity strengthening grants, I should say, um, re, uh, partnership opportunities. We also have program related investments, and we talked about that. But we're going to be asking ourselves over the next year, probably 18 months or so, but the bulk of it over the next year is to say, all right, we want to achieve this mission of supporting the neighborhood revitalizations. How do we do that? Is it the best way to do it? The current tools? Do we look at differently? Do we focus on geography? Do we focus on product? Do we focus on leveraging collaboratives and relationships? How are we going to be most effective? Since we were founded, the times have changed. We've had some significant change over the last, 2, 3, 4 years, and we want to be able to now begin to respond to that differently, but in the same way, achieving similar, if not better.
Okay, thank you. It's really helpful to hear the strategic planning of a funder. I think that when folks learn more through this video about the Regional Foundation, I think that it's really helpful for them to understand what the priorities are, understand how you're planning and your team is planning, and then knowing the scope of work that they can do. So I really appreciate all of this detail. I think it's going to be really helpful to a lot of folks, residents and other community-based organizations that know that this support is available. And also, we will certainly encourage people to contribute to grow your endowment so you can continue to do this great work. So thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate you being here today and sharing your information with us.
Thank you. And if I may, the best way to do that donation is through our partner at the Philadelphia Foundation. You want to go
Okay.
to Philadelphia, excuse me, go to their website, and then there and that's phillyfound.org. Give now button right there. They serve as our fiscal agent in that regard. Phillyfound.org, and go to the top right hand side. There's the give now. A little bit further down after that is direct your donation. and you would direct it to the regional foundation.
Okay.
And we appreciate this. Katrina, thank you for all that you do. You're doing a wonderful job, allowing us to, us and nonprofits to be able to share their story and grow their world. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. Take care.
Take care.